I'd like to provide some background on older adults. Some of this, as I said earlier in the syllabus discussion, might be a little redundant to some of you, but let's talk about it anyway. What is old? What is old to us? How do we define old? Here is a picture of my grandmother at about 90. She lived by herself until she was 92, 93. And she wasn't one stubborn woman. She lived independently. She enjoyed reading. She made her own clothes. She kept her own house. And she was a gardener. See her there with her beautiful flowers? She did all that. Now, my father and his brother, in the spring, they'd loosen up the dirt. But, I'd like to have my dirt loosened also. Is she old? What is old? We have to always keep in mind what is old. And how do we define old? There are many ways to define old. So, how old is old? There have always been old people. Think back to the times of Greece and Rome. There were old people then. What is different now is that we have many, many old people. So if we think back to Greece, Rome, the Middle Ages, the pioneers here in America, people didn't live very long. They died. There were, though, people that lived to be old. They were the educated, the wealthy, those who didn't get out and have to work hard. Now what has changed? From, say, 1900, that's 1900, the beginning of the last century, when life expectancy was 47, and now it's 80. What's happened? Everyone's getting old. That's the democratization of old age. We're healthier. We're living longer. Infant mortality is going away. People used to die as babies. People used to die as children. Women used to die in childbirth. Now, most people live to be old, to be 69, 70, 75, 80, 85, 90. So that's called the democratization of old age. There's some modern definitions of old age. Chronological age, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10, 25, those things of old age. When we get our birthday candles, that's the chronological old age things. Then there are legal definitions of old age. One of the most profound legal definitions of old age is something that's near and dear to most young people's hearts, and that's 16, getting that driver's license. 21, being able to drink. A legal definition of old age. 62, when you can first qualify for Social Security at a reduced benefit amount. There are multiple definitions of old age. 65 is a legal definition of senior in the courts. It's no longer the age when you qualify for full Social Security. It's going up and up and up. Then there are cultural definitions of old age and young age. What is the appropriate age to do something? Is it appropriate to do X These are changing also. And ageism is within that cultural context. I believe it's up to the boomers to change that ageism of what is culturally correct. Sometimes I look around and I see people who are in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, and I wonder, why are you doing that? Why is that appropriate? For example, is it appropriate for a 65-year-old woman to dye her hair purple and walk around with cotton candy hair that a 16-year-old is doing? I don't know. Tell me. I haven't figured that one out yet. Culturally, what is the age to become a grandparent? Some women become grandparents at 28. That is culturally not normatively accepted. The normal age is 50 to become a grandparent. When do you become old? Culturally, it depends upon your society. There are some societies that actually, and some subcultures that actually encourage their young women to have children early because the women themselves didn't really raise their children, so they want a grandchild, and they raise that grandchild. What is culturally old age? There's psychological old age. When do you think yourself old? Can you think yourself young? Can you keep yourself young? How old is old? And that is becoming a much more critical aspect of a modern definition of old age. I was recently back at a little town I lived in for 18 years, partway up Mount Rainier, and saw a group of women I had not seen in 25 years. The group of women were talking about dementia and Alzheimer's. These four women said, yes, we're going to just, when our husbands die, we'll move into a retirement community, we'll lose our minds, and the four of us will walk around in our little corner and we'll say hi to each other, and we'll know who we are, and we'll let everyone take care of us, and we'll have fun together because that'll be all fine. And I said, ladies, you need to exercise, you need to eat healthy, you need to do creative things, you need to change some of your lifestyle. And they looked at me and they said, that won't matter. It's all biological, it's all this, it's all that. And I looked at them. One of the women had recently lost her husband to Lewy body's disease at a young age, 62, and I knew this had been a painful time. And I said, no, it isn't. And the woman who was older, she was 70, she says, no, it's all biological, Jan, it's all biological. And I looked at her, I said, Sharon, do you know what I do for a living? She said, you don't know anything. I said, I think I do, but whatever. And I thought to myself when I left, how sad it was because they were setting themselves up for failure. It's the psychological. There is a component that is biologically in you, and that is some of the old age. But there's also that psychological component. And that really made me sad. Then there's financial definitions of old age. 58 and a half, for example. The first time you can take money out of your retirement account without paying a penalty. Still have to pay your taxes on it, but penalty. 62, you can qualify for Social Security, as I said. the other ones down the road. And then I don't have it here, but biological definition of old age, how you look. So there are many definitions of old age. So how does the public define old? This is a little bit old, this study, but it's still a critical one, and it's, at what age does the average man or woman become old? So the question was asked, do you consider yourself to be young? And so they ask, young, I'm missing some of the words here, middle-aged or old. So I want you to stop, pause a minute, and think about, when do you consider that? So the question is, at what age does the average man or woman become old? And look at this. Young people say 50. Older people say 70. The older you are, the higher it goes. And surprisingly, women who are 75 say, oh, it's 75. When you look at the median response for all of them, for men, it's 60, and for women, it's 65. I want them to do this study again. It's been 15 years because I think it'd be even higher. Do you consider yourself to be young, middle-aged, or old? Well, not surprisingly, young people think they're young. They had one person who maybe had an illness or something and said they thought they were old. You always have an outlier. But look at when you get to people 55 to 64. Most people think of themselves as middle-aged. But society doesn't often see 55 to 64-year-olds as middle-aged. There's an interesting phenomena. Whatever age you are, you tend to think of yourself as younger. And even people who are 75 plus see themselves as middle-aged. So look at this phenomena of 35 to 44-year-olds, 45 to 54-year-olds. Those are the people we usually think of as middle-aged. And yeah, a good deal of them think of themselves as middle-aged. But yet, look at the older people who see themselves as middle-aged. Here are a few more definitions of aging. Bernice Newgarden in 1975 coined these terms, young old, and oldest old. They're still used today. Although at the end of her life, she said, man, I wish I hadn't done this. Because we shouldn't just group people by ages. We should group people by abilities. Because there are old people that are more active than some of the young old. So you can look at the ages here, and you can see the ages that are associated with her categories. But I've known some young old people that really act like people that are 85 plus that are frail. Then there are these other words. Centenarians, people 100 plus, those are one of the fastest growing groups in societies. And then supercentenarians, those are people who are 110 plus, which are the fastest growing group. Then there is this great word, senescence, the natural decline of something, senescence. So let me explain senescence. Senescence is how things wear out. You know, if you're a runner and you run 5, 6, 7 miles every day of your life, eventually you wear that hip out. You need to get it replaced. Or that car. You keep driving and driving that car. No matter how well you keep that car up, you reach 297,000 miles like my Saturn did on its original clutch. That clutch just gave up. And that car was tired. That's senescence, the natural decline. And eventually our bodies do wear out. So those are some great terms for you to know. Those are some aspects of aging. But there's one thing we need to know about older adults, and that's how diverse they are. People group together in their minds, old people. You know, recently this guy died, and at his memorial, what was said about him, he was 92 when he died, was how much he hated to be around old people because they all stank. And he didn't want to be around smelly old people. And everyone laughed. But because that's what people think about often when they think of old people. Old, smelly old people. But the fact of the matter is, there is more diversity in the population of older adults than in most other population groups. They may be the most heterogeneous population group of them all. There's differences in the race, the ethnicity, the gender, the health, the social class, where they live, the culture, the amount of money they have, what they're doing. They are just as diverse as any group, and perhaps more so. But in the minds of people who think about the term older adults, they just group them together and think of them as that elderly group of people. Ooh, and that's a term we don't use, elderly and seniors. We use older adults. Rowan Kahn in 1997 came up with this concept of successful aging, and it became the goal of many gerontologists to live and to teach this philosophy of successful aging. It has three components: low probability of disease or disability, high cognitive physical functioning, and active engagement of life. If you think of it, these three components, and you put them into a Venn diagram where all three intersect, if you are living in that intersecting component, that's called successful aging. I propose that the boomers and the current older adults are living more successfully than older adults have in the past. My goal is to be one of the most successful agers of my cohort.